everybody, and welcome to another great episode of My EdTech Life. I am excited to be here with you all on this wonderful Thursday. And yes, I know it is Thursday. Usually our shows have been going Monday, Tuesday, Saturday, but due to some really severe weather, I had to cancel this amazing episode and postpone it for today. But I am just excited because we still get to have this amazing conversation. And before we get started, I just simply want to thank each and every single one of you for all of your support, all the likes, shares, and follows, all the love. Thank you so much. It really means to a lot to me from the bottom of my heart. As you know, I strive to bring you the best of the best as far as education content, edtech content, and everything that is out there right now. And most importantly, finding some amazing guests like tonight. I am really excited to welcome Tim Belmont to the show. Tim, how are you doing this evening?
I'm doing great, Fonz. How are you?
I am doing great. Like we were just talking pre-chat. And first of all, I want to thank you for being flexible and understanding. Honestly, we didn't expect that much rain. At least I didn't think it was going to be coming down that hard. But thank you so much for being flexible. And I'm glad that we were still able to make this show happen this week. And I know we've been getting a lot of love. A lot of people have been sharing and resharing the episode, at least the info and everything. So just really excited that we get to chat here tonight and really talk about the amazing work that you're doing. So for those of you who are not familiar with Tim's work, all I'm going to say before I give him the floor so he can introduce himself is I've been following Tim for a good while now, and he on Twitter, I follow him on Twitter, and he's always posting some great things that he's doing with his classroom. We're going to be talking about podcasting. We're going to be talking about his app called Brainstorm, which is really cool. But on top of that, he does some amazing things for his school district. But before we get into that, Tim, for our audience members that are joining us today or are going to be catching this on the replay, can you give us a little brief introduction and your context in education?
Sure. And also, I'm totally cool to reschedule. This is a great way to spend my Thursday night getting ready for the lead up to the weekend. So I'm just psyched to be here. Yeah.
Awesome.
And so, my name is Tim Belmont. I live in New Jersey, and I've been a high school English teacher for the last 10 years. But also, as the years have gone on, that role has changed and been added to a little bit. So for about the last 4 years, I've also been my school's educational technology specialist. So the classes that I teach are freshman English, public speaking, and advanced public speaking. But then as a technology specialist, I also help run professional development and provide resources for teachers and support for using apps and different methods in the classroom that involve technology. And then also as a hobby, since I was in high school, I've gotten into coding, developing websites and things like that. So that's been something else that I've brought to my teaching practice, and also I've done as a hobby as well. That's it in a nutshell, I guess.
Yeah, no, actually, that is a great little introduction, for really what we're going to be talking about. And what I'm really excited to talk about today, kind of like what we talked about in the pre-chat. But as you know, like I mentioned, and I guess I already kind of described how fascinated I am with your work and what you do. So I definitely make sure that I follow you on all social media. But like I tell all my guests, it's if you're a guest here is because I love the work that you're doing, and it's like a superhero kind of deal for me because sometimes the work that you're doing and the way you described yourself, like doing so many things, you definitely have to have some superpowers. But as we all know, every superhero has an origin story. So I am very curious to know a little bit more about Tim Belmont's origin story. So the way that I lead up into this is I always like to ask my guests, Tim, was education something that you knew you wanted to get into from the start, or was this something that came a little later in life?
So that's a great question. When I was in high school, I was very, very interested in English, and all of my English classes were a really positive place for me. I had some excellent teachers who always facilitated really interesting discussions, and we read great books and short stories and poems and things like that. And so as I progressed through high school, I started developing this sort of mixed bag of interests, whether that was music, coding, English. And I decided that when I went to college, I wanted to pursue English. But at first, I wasn't quite sure if I wanted to go into education or not. I started college just as an English major. But as soon as I got to college, it sort of dawned on me that I wanted to shift to secondary education with a focus in English. So during college, I took all of my teaching classes, and that sort of solidified the fact that I wanted to become a teacher. And then uh, the rest, as they say, is history. But it also, being a teacher gave me an opportunity to take all of the things I was interested in and sort of bring them into my teaching practice. So I mentioned that I was interested in coding and programming as well. So when I was doing my student teaching, I ended up developing a website for my students to use where they would answer comprehension questions and stuff. So I decided that I wanted to go into teaching and bring all my interests and hopefully share that passion with students as well. So that's sort of how it led me to here where I am today.
Excellent. That is wonderful to hear. And one thing that I love that you mentioned that I do want to highlight is the fact that you talked about your passions outside probably of education, like what you love to do. However, the fact that you bring those outside passions and you weave them into what you're doing as far as your curriculum and finding a space for it that is just very organic and natural is something that's great. And I think that also that really helps us as teachers just kind of keep things a little bit fresh where you can kind of mix a little bit of your outside enjoyment, like you said, the coding, the technology. And I know you do podcasting as well, and we're going to be talking a little bit about that, how you implement that into your curriculum as well. So that's wonderful, Tim. So I'm really excited to kind of segue into kind of the main topics today that we're going to be talking about that I
Sounds
feel
good.
that I see that you have a lot of expertise on and really a lot of things that you can share, because I know that I've, like I said, looking through your social media, talking about the experience in facilitating student podcasting. Can you tell us a little bit more about that, where that kind of came from to incorporate that into your curriculum or within your class setting?
Sure, absolutely. So going back way earlier, back when I was in high school, which we mentioned a little bit, I had the privilege of, in my high school, we had a recording studio. We had received a grant, I took a high-tech music class where we learned about things like audio production, whether it was music production or sort of radio shows. At the time, podcasts weren't even really a thing yet, but that sort of developed the initial interest in that kind of medium. And then once I started teaching English, I developed an interest in podcasting, mostly as a listener. I still listen to podcasts all the time. I'm really, really into it. And I've also dabbled in creating podcasts as well. And I was able to create a class essentially after a couple of years of teaching public speaking as an English teacher, which was advanced public speaking. And when this class was created, I was told this class is a continuation of public speaking class, and you can sort of build it out any way that you'd like, as long as it helps reinforce those public speaking skills. So since I have this interest in technology, I decided I wanted to sort of lean into the technological aspect. So originally it was creating presentations using technological tools, things like interactive presentations, the kind of things that teachers might use when we're teaching. But then over time, I got the resources to allow students to record their own podcasts as part of the class. So now we use that class. Most of the curriculum is students creating their own podcasts. We have a small collection of recording equipment. We go through the different terms, the different methods of recording, making it sound well, but then, of course, reinforcing all of those public speaking skills. And one of the great things about it is because it's framed in this sort of loose setting where the focus is on the speaking and not the content, students get to record podcasts on anything that they want. So it's also a great avenue for them to express what their interests are, things they're passionate about. And one framework that we've been using is every year we use the guidelines and we enter the NPR Student Podcast Challenge, which is every year NPR runs a competition where students who are in school submit a podcast between 3 and 8 minutes, and then the winner gets played on the radio. So it's that kind of thing where it's an authentic situation. They're not pretending to create a podcast. They're actually doing it. They're going through all the steps that anybody would normally go through in that situation. And also, of course, it's this huge budding industry. So by doing this, they're getting all of these skills that they could either use to make their own podcast in the future, or they could transfer to other fields. So basically, that's the main class where we've been doing student podcasting. And every year it's been getting a little bit more involved, a little bit more polished. So this year, our students right now, they're wrapping up their first set of podcasts that they've created. And this week in school, we had a listening party. So we had, some things to eat, some beverages as well. And then we got together and we listened to each other's podcasts, and we discussed how the process went, the challenges that we faced, how we can sort of get over those hurdles the next time we record. And for the rest of the school year, it's going to be a process of just refining. And then by the end of the year, just really getting it down so that students are making their own podcast, and they can continue to do that when the school year ends as well.
That is wonderful, Tim. And I love absolutely every single bit of that. And I wanted to highlight one of the things that you mentioned that I absolutely love too, is that really it's whatever platform the student feels more comfortable with, they can go ahead and use. And as we all know, there are so many platforms that are out there that are completely free. So from the instructional technologist viewpoint, from myself, and of course, we've got things that CTOs require and things of that sort. I want to ask you, how do you determine which apps from the many that they can choose from are okay for them to select based on maybe some security issues, or maybe, of course, license or not licenses, but of course, accounts and so on? Is there something that, or a guideline that your district provides for you, or did you all come up with the guidelines together?
So for this specific instance, we sort of talked about it together, because obviously I didn't want to just jump in and say, hey, everybody record something and we're going to just blast it off on the internet so anybody can hear it and all of that. So I sat down with my supervisor and we talked about what we could do, what things sort of adhered to our school's policies. And what we ended up coming up with is we have this sort of system of sharing where we start off in the course publishing sort of locally just to the class. So this first podcast that we recorded, I encourage students to use Soundtrap. We have a license to Soundtrap, which is awesome. Their whole team has been so helpful through the process. I actually presented at FETC with my friend Serena, who works for Soundtrap. So they've been so supportive throughout this whole process with me. And they record on that platform, and then we just use Google Sites to publish them. So with that, it's limited to our district. So only students who have a school email are allowed to view the podcast themselves. Then as time goes on, our goal is to have them published to a wider audience, which, as you mentioned, there are hurdles with things like privacy and different policies that we have in place, either the state has in place or the school has in place. So we ultimately do end up publishing some of the products that the students make on the platform formerly known as Anchor. They just changed it to Spotify for podcasters. But with that, again, we send home slips to get permission from parents and guardians. We don't have any identifying information on the podcasts when we publish them either. So basically, it's a conversation with the district. We keep in communication with the people at home as well. So we do want that authentic sharing, but we also want to make sure that we're doing it in a safe manner as well.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. And the only reason I asked that is just because I know that maybe some of our listeners that are in the same boat, maybe, or as far as, introducing tech or are interested in the podcasting, it's just great information for them to know what to do, because oftentimes as educators, and myself included, I put myself in that where sometimes I just get really excited and a little too overexcited. I'm just like, yeah, let's go ahead and do this. And then it's like, oh, oops, I kind of missed that step. And but
Mhm.
it's great. And so thank you so much for sharing that, the fact that you do have those conversations. And of course, being very cautious with what you share, the identifiers. So those are great, excuse me, that is great advice for a lot of our audience members that are listening that do want to introduce podcasting into their classroom. And before I talk to you a little bit more about Soundtrap, I do want to ask, as far as your projects, maybe from year to year, or maybe just this year alone, if you can, have you noticed any trends or themes that emerge from your students recording, or is everything kind of based, because you did mention that they can podcast upon some of their favorite things? Are there anything that you see right now that students are really, vocal about or in sharing?
Absolutely. And it's interesting because this year NPR has a sort of focus where they want entries that focus on mental health. And I have multiple students who jumped in and were very eager to talk about that very topic. I had one student who decided to talk about just challenges of being a teenager and an adolescent and conducting interviews with people about their experience. And then I had another student who also did a podcast about just her feelings on mental health and how school affects it as well. And this isn't just for this year. In the past, I've had many students also talk about this, and it always sort of blows my mind when it comes time for students to choose their topics for the podcasts, because I don't say anything like, you need to leave it all on this show. You need to be super personal and you need to be very candid. But they want to. A lot of them want to sort of express their experience and talk about it. And it always sort of it's inspiring and amazing to me how open so many of them are when they're talking about these kind of things. But I mean, this year the topics are there's quite a range. I have a student who did an interview with his 94-year-old grandmother, which is it's absolutely great. And also, to this student's credit, he had the most technical issues that you could ever imagine, and he went through it like a champ, and he ended up learning so much, and I learned a lot too about how he handled the technical issues he had as well. But yeah, there's just every year the topics that the students choose are just it's an inspiration to me every time. But to go back to your original question, mental health is something that is very seems to be very front of mind for most teenagers.
Yeah. And that's something that maybe we should consider listening to. I mean, obviously they're being very vocal about it. So these are things that, us as educators, excuse me, and just as an audience, whether we're there in school or somebody that's listening to this, things that we need to really pay attention to, because oftentimes those can be maybe just a need for help or just more support, or what can we do to provide just better assistance within our schools and our school settings. So I think that could be something like, as far as advocating, the students advocating for this particular topic, which is mental health, advocating for themselves, and then just really sharing, hey, we can do a little bit better, and so things
Yeah,
that we can
totally.
improve on. Totally. All
Mhm.
right, so now getting back a little bit, you did mention your student that had some technical issues and things of that sort. So as far as platforms are concerned, I know you mentioned Spotify for podcasters. We talked about for you sharing the audio. We talked about Soundtrap. What are, for our audience members again that may be interested in this particular topic, what are some other applications or programs that you use or offer to your students as an option for them to record their podcast?
Sure. So I give students the option if they want to. I mean, Soundtrap is a extremely versatile platform. It's a multi-track editor, so you could have two microphones and then background music and sound effects, and it gives you precision editing and all of that. But I also tell students to use whatever they're already familiar with. I've had students who decide, oh, I'm just going to record most of my podcast using the voice memo app on my iPhone, And they end up doing that. And with a little bit of editing, they usually have to use another platform to edit it. It ends up sounding great. So with something as simple as that, what students already may have in their pocket, that can be used to make a podcast essentially. And a couple of other sites that I recommend, there's this website, Vocaroo. And Vocaroo is a website with a button, and you click on the button and it records. And then that's it. Then you have an audio file. It's really one of the fastest and easiest ways to just get audio recorded. And then you just have this file of your voice, and then you can sort of do what you wish from there. And as far as editing is concerned further on, I always also mention that there are platforms that are great to use as sort of stepping stones to recording what would be known as a fully fledged multi-track podcast. Platforms like Microsoft Flip and then Padlet, all of these EdTech tools have voice recording options. And it's a great way to use, some educators refer to it as micro podcasting, sort of little practice activities. And that's a great way to have students get used to their voice and sort of just get it recorded, and then they can sort of go from there.
And those are some excellent apps that you mentioned, and thank you for sharing, because for our audience members, sometimes they may get overwhelmed and feel like, oh my gosh, this is what I'm going to need. I need Soundtrap. I need to get those licenses. But sometimes it's okay to just start with the lowest barrier to entry. And you said most of the students already have a cell phone in their pocket, whether it's Android or whether it's iOS. There's some kind of voice recording memo, or Chromebooks that are offered in schools, things of that sort, that you can go into. You said Vocaroo. One of the apps that websites that I like to is 123apps.com, because you can also record yourself, just your voice, or you can do just a face recording like webcam, and then get your audio files from there too as well. So yeah, excellent. Thank you so much for sharing those tools. So for all our audience members that are watching, there you go. You've got some suggestions there from Tim, who uses these. And of course, each one's going to be a little bit different, but I love the fact that students can use what they feel most comfortable with.
Yeah, totally.
So I wanted to ask you, Tim, because I, like I said, going through your Twitter feed too as well, I see here, I know you mentioned FETC, but you also presented at NJECC also, and you did a presentation on Soundtrap. So can you tell us a little bit more as far as what your presentation entails? Is this something that is really just talking about the student side of their projects, or is this also for teachers or educators to learn how to, use some of these tools as well?
Sure. So the presentations I did at FETC and NJECC were slightly different, but whenever I give a presentation about podcasting, my goal is just to share my experience, what it was like facilitating podcasts, and then along the way, just give some advice about what was helpful for me, what went well, what the challenges were. And every time I present, it's usually a little different, because I'm always learning new things that could streamline the process. I do have a section about tools that could be used. And I really do try and emphasize, like you mentioned, getting rid of some of those barriers to entry and getting sort of demystifying it a little bit. Because, for example, people see like a microphone like this, and it's like, oh, I need this microphone to go record a podcast, but that's really not the case at all. So it's a little bit of everything, but like I said, it sort of is just framed in, this was my experience, this is how it went for me, here's what I maybe would have done differently, this is what I could sort of do in the future, and this is what went well as well.
Perfect. That works. And that's great that we need that information. And again, I think that this is something that's very big. And right now, podcasting is huge. And I love what you mentioned, a little bit, prior to this section here, that this is something that is huge. And the fact that students are learning these skills now in your classroom and in classrooms around the nation and even around the globe. I mean, this is something that is amazing, and it just continues to grow. As now we saw YouTube podcasts, we see also, Spotify for podcasters adding that video option. We see Anchor obviously turning into Spotify for podcasters, and so many just great things that are happening in this space. And so it gets me really excited about just getting to this point, for myself too included, and just everything that you learn. There's always so much. So definitely encourage, and anybody that's watching right now, or all our audience members, make sure you follow Tim, because he does post a lot on podcasting, and you'll definitely be able to get a lot of great resources from him as well. So
Yeah.
Tim, I kind of want to segue now into something else. You talked about how you love coding as well, and that was one of your passions outside of education. And as we know right now in education, it seems like every time, and because of myself too, I mean, every time we go on Twitter, it's like I'm always looking for stuff on AI and information. And I love sharing information also as well, and putting out posts and things to consider and conversations and so on. But I did notice that as, Chat GPT opened up, and then, for a while there, then all of a sudden I see that, Tim, you came up with Brainstorm, and I will be sharing that link right now here in our chat, but it will definitely also be in our show notes. So talk to me a little bit about Brainstorm. As what I'm going to do right here, I'll share it right now on the screen, but I'm just going to read here where it says, let's brainstorm, get some brainstorming ideas generated by AI. So Tim, I want to know where this idea came from.
Sure. So I saw when Chat GPT was sort of, blowing up in popularity towards the end of last year, beginning of this year. Like everybody else, I sat down and I started, plugging in prompts and seeing what it was capable of. And then I noticed that they have their API available, which essentially allows other websites to plug in and use Chat GPT. At the time, it was GPT-3. And so I started thinking, is there any way that I could possibly use this in my class where it could maybe help streamline a process for students? And my first sort of thought was, and everybody still has a little bit this apprehension about AI tools just taking over a full process that students are doing. And what I immediately thought was, this could be useful for brainstorming. It could be an excellent first step, because what I saw in my public speaking class is that a lot of times students were getting sort of stuck on that, again, that first hurdle, doing something like a presentation, coming up with an initial idea, or coming up with just some different sections to use. So I thought, what if I made a web interface where students could enter a topic about a presentation they wanted to do, and it could just give them a couple of ideas, some starting points. And so I plugged it in. I made a website. I messed around a little bit. It took me about a weekend to make the first prototype of it. And I ended up creating this website for my students to use. And it's a pretty simple interface. They enter a topic, and it gives the first tool I made was the presentation tool, and it gives them a definition of the topic they entered, gives them an opening question they can use, and then it also gives 3 possible sections for a presentation. So essentially, again, it's giving that starting point, hopefully allowing students to start with something, and then they can sort of take it from there. And it ended up working out pretty well. I suggested that students use it in class, and many of them found it very helpful. And one thing that I found that's interesting is that most students don't just, when they get the results like this, they don't just immediately copy and paste everything and use it exactly as is. They do take the time to think critically about it. Is this a good opening question? Can I improve this opening question? Are these sections good? Should I refine them a little bit as well? So I think it's been excellent, and I've just been slowly refining it a little bit. And it's been a fun little project for me as well, because I find that when I'm sitting and I'm coding and I'm making a website, I sort of get into that flow state a little bit. So it's created some enjoyment for me also.
Oh, that is great, Tim. And I love it. And, you're absolutely right on a couple of things that you hit on, right from the get go. It's obviously that, educators being a little reluctant, a little bit hesitant, because like you mentioned, it's that fear. And I think you explained it very well, where a tool is just going to completely take over a process. But what I see here, very similar to, I know we talked about this in pre-chat, but you got to connect with Logan
Mhm.
from Auto Classmate. He was on the show. And so very similar kind of thought process between both of you, that you kind of mentioned, that you said, this is something that I thought that you both thought was something useful that can help you. And then now it can help students. His is more geared for the teacher. Yours is a little bit more geared for the student, but it's almost very similar as far as what you're trying to accomplish. But I absolutely love this. And as for our audience members that were just watching this, my topic that I put in here was podcasting. And then, this is what it gave me. So it says podcasting is a form of digital media that consists of audio or video files that are distributed over the internet. Possible opening question. I love the fact that, the suggestions that it makes here. So it says, how many of you have listened to a podcast before? And then presentation sections, overview of podcasting, benefits of podcasting, strategies for creating a successful podcast. So many great things that are here. And like you said, one thing that I love is that the students aren't necessarily going to stick to this, but it's a great way to start the conversation. And
Mhm.
sometimes, we get those little, writer's block or just any kind of block. And sometimes that just kind of like kills that flow state. But once you kind of get something going, then you can kind of go and dive in deep and search and do those things. And so I absolutely love this, Tim. When I first saw you do it or saw this, I was like, this is amazing. And this is really, to me, what I see AI doing for education, for teachers, for students alike. And then, of course, I believe truly once admin get into this, there's going to be an admin side of this, because we know that there's so many things that just need to just be done, and that can be, automated, and such a tool,
Mhm.
something like this can definitely help. So this is
Yeah.
amazing.
Thank you so much. I really am. I'm interested to see over the next couple of months. It seems like there is this novelty around AI where, it's a very buzzy type of word. And I am interested to see what's going to remain once the novelty wears off a little bit. But I know
Mhm.
there is definitely a lot of applications that are genuinely very useful, and not just sort of because of this like little bit of hype around it. So
Yeah.
I'm psyched to see what the future holds as well.
Most definitely. I'm with you on that. So with Brainstorm, very similar to what I asked you as far as, your podcasting and the podcasting assignment, but I wanted to ask you to hear, have there been any interesting surprises or insights as your students have used this, anything that has popped out that you're like, huh, maybe that's something else that could be added, or how Brainstorm can actually evolve into something like this? Anything that's really caught your attention?
I did. I had a student, sorry, a teacher who had reached out to me that she was using this tool with her students, which was awesome. It was such a cool thing to just get an email saying, "Oh, like I'm using your tool. It's working out really well." Sort of just adding to a little bit of refinement with coming up with specific topics. Um, and I'm always sort of thinking about potential other tools to add to this. And I did add a second tool, which I realized that my students were having trouble coming up with people if they wanted to do a project on a person. So I created a tool to generate a list of people based on two interests, which works out pretty well also. Ultimately, though, I don't really know what the future holds. I'm keeping an open mind about it. It's a little tough for me to focus all of my energy on developing the site because I'm teaching a full load of classes and all of that. But um, right now, I don't really have a total clear idea of what the next step is. But I'm just keeping an open mind at this point.
Oh, that's perfect though. I mean, that's kind of the way to go. Just kind of wait and see, and then from there, just say, okay, let me see what we can do here and add to it. But like you said, as much as you do, because like not only are you doing all your classes, but on top of that, you're the instructional technologist, or also your support for your school. And it's amazing how you are able to find that time. So that is amazing. But I just wanted to bring up this right here also again, Brainstorm, because I put here people, and then I put in, okay, here's a podcasting, to interest and creativity. And here I got my results here. I got Ira Glass, Roman Mars, Brene Brown, Elizabeth Gilbert. So I love that it has, little descriptions here as far as who the people are, and that have related interests. So this is something that is really neat, and I love it, because for a student just to type in and their interests, and then see people that maybe that they've never heard of, but to learn about them, I think that that is something that is wonderful. So I love this side of it too, Tim. So this is wonderful. So
Thanks.
it's really great. I mean, two simple applications for AI, but that can make a huge impact. And like I said, I'm digging it. Just the fact that you've got presentation starter, and then now I get to meet or learn new people, or see what I have in common with some of these people, like Elizabeth Gilbert, and then of course Brene Brown. I was like, wow, she's on the list. That's awesome.
Yeah, totally. And that also, I just that uses GPT-4, the newest sort of AI model that OpenAI released, and it was interesting to see that now it does a lot better job of finding people who match both interests. So it's been cool to see how the AI model has improved even just in a couple of months.
Oh yeah, most certainly.
Mhm.
All right, Tim. Well, I got a couple of questions for you. As we kind of start wrapping up. These aren't the final three questions yet, but just because of the level of tech that you use, your current role, of course, heavy into the podcasting, and then of course because you do have that background in web development, and of course creating this wonderful application here that uses AI. My question to you is, where do you see AI, going, as far as in the education landscape, maybe within the next 5 to 10 years, at least through your lens and through your thought process?
Man, that's a great question. It's hard to know. It's tough because I feel like right now every sort of platform and EdTech tool is integrating AI. And like I said, I think over time we're going to see how much of that integration is really genuinely needed and how much of it has some sort of novelty. I do see it sort of automating some of the things that take up a teacher's day that are more logistical. And hopefully it will free up time for more planning genuine, interesting learning experiences for students and forging those actual connections. Because I'd like to think that instead of having something like AI sort of make us more distant, it gives us more time to have those one-on-one conversations, to go and see what our students are doing in person. So that's what my hope is, at least.
Yeah. No, and you mentioned a couple of things there too as well. I know Logan mentioned it too, and then obviously with some of the research and some of the stuff and the blogs that I've been putting out, it's that those connections. One of the things is that I am with you 100% as far as AI taking away some of those menial tasks. Oftentimes the case is this: as a teacher, it seems like your plate is always overflowing, and even though it's always overflowing, there's always something else that'll creep in. And especially, and I just want to add, because we are in test taking season that we call here in Texas, it's always like that little job creep, little things that are additional and so on. So I'm hoping, with a lot of these AI tools that are out there, just be able to get rid of some of those, tasks that could just be done fairly easy, remove those off the plate. And I love what you said. It's almost giving teachers, or teachers feeling like they're getting their time back to really enhance, the creativity, enhance their lesson. And of course, like, we have here the title of the show, Empower the Modern Classroom, and they really get to do it. They have the time for it. So that's what I'm here for too, as well, because I also agree with you. The AI, is not really going to make that connection. They're not, the AI is not going to be able to read the room,
Hmm.
see and meet a child's need, just by visually seeing, checking for understanding, checking how the child is doing, checking all of those things. And, like I said, it is going to be a wonderful tool. We probably going to see a lot more of it. But again, where is the teacher gonna, or like, how is the teacher role going to change or evolve? And I would love to think that it's going to evolve into really being that amazing facilitator that has that time to really engage students,
Yeah.
with great lessons. So that's what I'm really excited for and looking forward to. Obviously, and I've been very vocal about it, on Twitter, is just really, I'm kind of like in the middle trying to reconcile obviously the good, but we also got to think about, of course, the data privacy and all of those
Sure.
things. So I'm kind of in the middle of those. But as I'm seeing and slowly, like I said, I'm here for all of it, because it could definitely do some good in the education landscape. So that's awesome. So Tim, before we start wrapping up with the final three questions, all I want to say is I am so thankful for you to be here on the show. I am very grateful to be able to speak with you, my friend, and really just my bucket is full. I am so pumped up and my adrenaline is flowing, and I definitely have a lot of great sound bites from this episode. But before we get into our last three questions, Tim, for all our audience members, again, like I mentioned, that may not be familiar with your work yet, where is it that they can follow you? How can they follow you? How can they reach you? So please go ahead and plug away, my friend.
Sure. And before I do that, I want to thank you for having me on the show. I've been watching your show for a couple of years now, and I mentioned this to you before, but it's really, watching your show got me wanting to be more involved in the education community, being more involved on Twitter, reaching out to people, and I've met people through seeing them on your show before. So I'm just happy to be here, and it's things like this that refill the engine and keep us going. So thank you so much.
Oh,
Um,
absolutely, Tim. And thank you so much for that comment. That feedback really goes a long way. And one thing that you just said right now, when you said, "Oh, I've been watching for years," like I can't believe it. It's gonna be 3 years in like about a couple of weeks. And right now it just kind of hit me a little bit harder, even though we mentioned it pre-chat, but it's kind of great. And again,
mhm.
this is what I'm here for. Connecting with amazing educators like yourself and all the others that have come by, and then like you mentioned, you being able to connect with them, that's our mission. So I'm grateful for
Yeah,
that, so thank you. And
yeah,
again, please make sure you let our audience members know how they can go ahead and plug in with you and
sure.
connect.
So on Twitter, my username is tbelmontedu. I post on there fairly frequently. It's sort of like I have waves of posting a lot, and then but I whatever I'm up to, I'll share on there. And then I also have my website, timbelmont.com. I have a couple blog posts on it. And then I have the Brainstorm site is just brainstorm.timbelmont.com. And I did want to quickly mention, I see Katie Fielding in the chat. Hi, Katie. How you doing? We're presenting at ISTE in the next coming months. We're doing a session on digital student reflections that we're both really excited about. So I'm psyched about that.
That is awesome. And I'm hoping to meet up with you in real life at ISTE. So that'll be amazing that I get to see you all and, just high five y'all and whatever, because I get so excited when I get to meet some amazing guests that I've had here. And like I said, a lot of, all of you that are here on the show, and there's countless other educators that I can't wait to get on, that are like my edu superheroes. I know it sounds a little whatever cheesy, but I'm really passionate about this, the education, and of course, just amazing educators like yourself that keep just us on our toes with all the great things that you share. So thank you so much for all the work that you're doing, and for Katie too. Thank you so much, my friend, for always being a supporter. Thank you so much for joining us in the chat. So Tim, here we go. We are getting ready to wrap up here, but before we do so, I always like to end the show with these final three questions. So question number one, Tim, is, in the current state of education, what would you say is your current edu kryptonite?
I really think that when I think about the kryptonite that I face is just lack of time to do the things that I want to do during the course of the school day. There's just so many things that as a teacher, and every single teacher can relate to this, whether it's planning for a class, doing things like paperwork. And it's not that any of these things are not necessary. There's just a lot of things to do. So really taking the time to sit and reflect sometimes can be hard to come by. So for me, it's just getting overwhelmed with the sheer number of things to do and the things that I want to do. But I'm making time to sort of relax and recharge and refocus. So it's something I'm working on.
Excellent. Great answer, Tim. Thank you so much. All right. Question number 2, Tim. If you could have a billboard with anything on it, what would it be and why?
So I was thinking about this a little bit earlier, and there's a quote that I think about a lot, and then I also share with my students quite a bit. And the quote that I would probably put on the billboard is, "Be kind, for everyone is fighting a hard battle." And it's just that idea that we don't know what everybody's going through. And sort of we need to understand that everybody has things that are going on in the background that we don't know. So it's always a good idea to be kind. And then I'd probably put a picture of my dog on the billboard too, just to add to a little bit of happiness, hopefully for everybody.
Excellent. There you go. That's a great quote. Thank you so much for sharing, Tim. And I do agree. Sometimes you just don't know what somebody may be facing. So kindness definitely goes a long way and it can make a huge difference. So thank you so much. All right. And the last question, Tim, that I always like to ask is, let's say that this was the Tim Belmont show and I had the honor of being your guest. What might be one question you'd like to ask me?
All right, Fonz. So I want to know what you have been listening to lately. What's been on repeat for you, whether at home, whether out and about?
Actually, great question. Great question. So right now, these last couple of days, I'd probably say within probably the last, well, since Monday, actually. So yeah, it's been about 4 days now. What's been on repeat on my Spotify has been some Frank Sinatra. It's an amazing Frank Sinatra playlist. It's like a dinner vibe. And it's almost weird because it feels like it's the background music that I would hear maybe like at an Olive Garden or something like that, like one of those restaurants. But it has just gotten me like so mellowed out, and I love editing, just hearing like those amazing Frank Sinatra, Frankie Valli. It's a great mix that is on there. And so that's really what I've been listening to. However, I do mix in, just for my friends that are like, okay, I do mix in a little bit of Coheed and Cambria. And sometimes I mix in a little bit of old school, brand new. And, back from my old punk rock days, I was listening, actually on the way over here, I was listening to Madness, getting a little ska in there too as well. So, but
Nice.
It has been mainly that Frank Sinatra playlist for sure.
That's awesome. It's funny you mentioned that because me and my wife, we listen to Dean Martin all the time. And so we also have that same vibe. But then also we were listening to Brand New like 2 days ago too. So
Yeah,
there we go.
I love it. I love everything about that. So thank you so much. That is a great question. Tim, again, thank you sincerely. This has been an amazing conversation. I am glad that we finally made this conversation happen. Thank you so much for also being very flexible with your schedule. And I'm glad that this is going to lead you into the weekend, pumped up and everything. It's been a great, great conversation. So again, thank you. And for all our audience members, I see Sherry who's joining here on LinkedIn. Katie, thank you so much for joining in on YouTube. We also had one more person here that I don't want to miss, and she was here, or yeah, I'm not sure. It says Monty Chick. Thank you so much. She said that it's been great. So thank you so much. Make sure that you all follow Tim if you don't already do so. And of course, thank you, as always, from the bottom of my heart for your support. Please make sure that you guys stop by our website. Go to myedtech.life, myedtech.life, where you can check out this amazing episode and the other 186 amazing episodes with amazing and wonderful educators that you can go ahead and take some of those little knowledge nuggets, sprinkle them on to what you are already doing great. And also, please make sure that you drop us a review, guys. If there's something, if you're really loving the show, loving what we do, we definitely appreciate a little 5-star review to show some love, to continue to help grow our show. And if you want to support our mission to connect educators and creators one show at a time, you can also stop by our merch store where you can get some great caps, some great shirts. And as you know, all of that continues to get poured back into the show so we can continue to improve what we're doing and make it better each and every single time, and bring you some amazing conversations, amazing connections, and amazing content. So thank you so much for all of your support. And my friends, don't forget, as always, until next time, where's my video? Here we go. Stay techie.